A girl is Jane, the 9-year-old. Is she?
Oh, very intelligent, very intelligent. You've only got to tell her a thing once, and she always does what she's told. Never to talk to any strangers on the beach. When she swims there, always in groups.
Australia Day, 1966, Jane, Arnna and Grant Beaumont came here to do what Australian kids relish, just a few hours on the beach at the end of the long summer school holidays. They never returned home. It is Australia's greatest mystery, a crime that destroyed a family.
Australia Day, 1966. 3 children walk to catch a bus to the beach. They never come home. For nearly 6 decades, no bodies. No arrest. No answers. Just a tall stranger on the sand, a string of suspects who died before facing justice, and a case that's outlived almost everyone who first investigated it. This is the story nobody in Australia has ever been able to close. Before we go further, if unsolved Australian mysteries keep you up at night, this channel exists for exactly that. New cases, every week, no filler. Now, back to Glenelg Beach, January 1966. A day that started like any other summer afternoon, and ended with 3 children erased from existence, leaving investigators chasing ghosts for decades and counting. To understand how strange this disappearance was, you have to understand how ordinary the day began. It was January 26, 1966, Australia Day. A public holiday. The city of Adelaide was baking under a brutal summer heatwave, the kind that pushes entire suburbs toward the coast just to breathe. The Beaumont family lived in Somerton Park, a quiet, working-class beachside suburb, just a short bus ride from Glenelg Beach, one of Adelaide's most popular stretches of sand, especially on a holiday morning. Nancy and Jim Beaumont had 3 children. Jane was 9, the oldest, responsible, the one entrusted to look after her younger siblings. Arnna was 7, quieter, closer in age to her older sister. And Grant, just 4, the baby of the family, still small enough to need watching but old enough to tag along on adventures. This wasn't the first time the children had gone to Glenelg without their parents. In 1966, this was completely normal. Australian childhood in that era ran on a kind of trust that feels almost unimaginable today. Kids roamed neighborhoods, caught public buses alone, and came home when the streetlights turned on. Nancy had let them make this exact trip before. It was 10 minutes on the bus, a short walk to the sand, and the beach was crowded with holidaymakers. Safety in numbers, or so it seemed. That morning, Nancy gave the children bus fare and a little spending money for lunch. She expected them home by early afternoon, in time to beat the worst of the heat. She would spend the rest of her life waiting for that afternoon to arrive. It's this ordinariness, the sheer unremarkableness of the morning, that makes what happened next so difficult to comprehend. There was no warning, no red flag, just 3 kids, a public bus, a beach full of strangers, and a mother who had no reason to think twice. By the end of the day, that trust would be gone. And so would her children. The children left home around 10 a.m., catching the bus alone to Glenelg. It wasn't unusual. Jane had made this trip with her siblings before, and Nancy had no reason to worry. What happened next comes almost entirely from witness accounts pieced together after the fact. Because at the time, nobody was watching closely enough to realize they were witnessing the last hours of 3 children's lives. Throughout the morning, multiple witnesses reported seeing the Beaumont children playing on the beach, and, critically, they weren't alone. A man was with them. Described as tall, lean, and blonde, somewhere in his mid-30s, with a swimmer's build. Witnesses said he interacted with the children easily, comfortably, nothing that raised alarm at the time. Some accounts placed him swimming with them. Others recalled him simply sitting nearby, talking. Around noon, the children were seen at a nearby delicatessen, buying lunch, meat pies and a pasty, along with a bottle of ginger beer. This detail matters, because witnesses said the children paid for their lunch with a larger note than the coins Nancy had given them that morning. Money nobody could account for. Where it came from has never been explained. After lunch, Witnesses again placed the children on the beach with the same unidentified man throughout the early afternoon. And then, nothing. No further sightings. No trace. When the children failed to return home by early evening, Nancy Beaumont's concern turned to panic. Jim searched the beach himself before contacting police. By nightfall, what had started as a missed bus home had become a full missing persons case, and within days, one of the largest search operations South Australia had ever conducted. Police interviewed hundreds of beachgoers. They circulated a composite sketch of the mystery man based on witness descriptions. They dragged nearby waterways, searched scrubland, followed leads phoned in by a jittery public suddenly aware that Australia's sense of safety had a hole in it. But nothing turned up. No bodies. No confirmed sighting of where they went after the beach. No solid identification of the man last seen with them. It was as if 3 children had simply stepped out of their own lives.
Today is the 7th day that Jane, Arnna and Grant Beaumont have been missing, and it's the 4th time that the police have searched this area of the Sandhills.
For a case that began with such an unremarkable morning, the vanishing itself felt almost impossibly clean. No struggle reported, no scene, no evidence trail. Just an empty stretch of sand where 3 kids used to be. What followed was, at the time, the largest police investigation in South Australian history, one that would occupy detectives for the rest of their careers. In the first weeks, over 200 police officers combed Glenelg and the surrounding coastline. Volunteers joined organized search parties. Divers searched the waters off the beach. Officers went door to door through Somerton Park and neighboring suburbs, asking anyone and everyone if they'd seen the children, or the mystery man last seen with them. The composite sketch became the centerpiece of the investigation. Tall, blonde, athletic build, mid-30s. It was printed in newspapers across the country. Thousands of tips poured in. And here's where the case starts to reveal just how difficult it would become, because almost every lead ran into a dead end. Some witnesses reported seeing a man matching the description near the beach in the days after the disappearance, still swimming alone, seemingly unbothered. Others claimed to have seen him boarding a bus. None of it led anywhere concrete. Without security cameras, without DNA testing, without any of the forensic tools modern investigators take for granted, police were working almost entirely on memory and description, and human memory, under pressure, is notoriously unreliable. Then came what became known as the Jane letters. In the years following the disappearance, the Beaumont family began receiving letters allegedly written by Jane, claiming the children were safe and being cared for by a man who had taken pity on them after Grant was accidentally injured. It was never established whether this was meant to be the same man seen with them on the beach. Handwriting experts were divided on the letters' authenticity. Desperate for any lead, police and the family pursued them seriously. At one point, following instructions from the letters, they staged a meeting at Adelaide's Rundle Street Mall, with an undercover policewoman posing as Nancy Beaumont. No one appeared. The Jane letters, to this day, have never been conclusively proven real or fake. Over the next 3 decades, leads kept surfacing and dying out. A psychic, brought in twice. Excavations ordered based on tips that led nowhere. This is where the case starts to fracture into decades of false starts. The investigation that began with hundreds of officers slowly narrowing down to a handful of dedicated detectives, chasing a trail that kept going cold no matter how hard they pulled at it. Then, in 2007, everything changed. A new letter surfaced, this one from a woman claiming her father had confessed, on his deathbed, to killing 3 children and burying them at his factory. That single claim would trigger not 1, but 3 separate excavations of the same industrial site over the following 2 decades, the most recent as late as 2025. Each time, hope. Each time, heavy machinery, forensic teams, television crews camped outside the gates. And each time, nothing but animal bones. It's almost unbearable, watching decade after decade of genuine effort collapse into the same result. Silence. Before we get into the suspects, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching this from. It's wild how far a story like this travels. And if you're new here, go ahead and hit subscribe, and drop a like on this one. It genuinely helps this channel keep digging up cases like this. Alright, let's talk about who investigators think that man on the beach really was. Over the decades, dozens of names have been floated as the man on the beach. But 3 stand above the rest. Arthur Stanley Brown. A convicted child killer, Brown had a documented history of violence against children and lived in South Australia at the time. He fit elements of the witness description and had access to properties where he could have hidden victims. But police were never able to place him definitively at Glenelg that day, and he died without ever being formally charged in connection with the Beaumont case. To this day, some investigators consider him the strongest theoretical match. Others argue the evidence against him is entirely circumstantial. Harry Phipps. A wealthy Adelaide businessman who owned the Castalloy factory, the site of the 3 digs you just heard about. He's the man named in that 2007 letter, his own daughter, who claimed he confessed to burying the children on the property before he died. Phipps had also reportedly paid for his own son to be sent overseas shortly after the disappearance, a detail some believe was meant to keep the son from ever being questioned by police. But despite 3 excavations, not a single piece of physical evidence has ever tied Phipps to the case. He died in 2004, having never been charged. Bill Cotton, the newest name in the case. In January 2026, on the 60th anniversary of the disappearance, investigative journalist Brian Littley publicly named Cotton, a convicted sex offender, as a serious person of interest. Citing overlapping victim profiles and geographic connections, investigators have flagged with other cases from the same era, though full details haven't been made public. Around the same time, a bone was discovered at a separate site and handed to South Australian police for forensic testing. But there's a problem. The way the bone was collected and cut before it reached investigators may have compromised any DNA testing, meaning it could be months or years before anyone knows if it's even human, let alone connected to this case. What's striking, watching these theories side by side, isn't that any one of them feels definitively right. It's that none of them feels definitively wrong either. Each suspect has just enough circumstantial weight to keep believers convinced, and just enough missing evidence to keep skeptics unconvinced. And that's really the defining feature of the Beaumont case. It's not short on suspects. It's short on proof. Decades of theories, 3 major excavations, handwriting analysis, psychics, a deathbed confession relayed secondhand, and still, nothing that would hold up in a courtroom. Which raises an uncomfortable question that's followed this case for generations. Is the truth actually still out there somewhere, or did it die with the people who knew it? 60 years on, the Beaumont case isn't just an unsolved mystery, it's a permanent scar on Australian culture. Before 1966, Australian parents let their kids roam freely, walking to school, catching buses alone, spending entire days unsupervised without a second thought. After the Beaumont children vanished, that changed almost overnight. Parents across the country began keeping closer watch. Kids stopped being sent off alone the way Jane, Arnna, and Grant had been that morning. Historians and criminologists still point to this single case as the moment Australia's collective sense of safety fractured. The true beginning of stranger danger as a cultural instinct, decades before the term existed. For Nancy and Jim Beaumont, the toll was immeasurable. They kept the children's bedroom untouched for years, holding on to the hope that they might one day walk back through the door. Nancy passed away in 2019, having spent more than 50 years without ever learning what happened to her children. Jim died a few years earlier, in 2016, the same year that marked the case's 50th anniversary. And the investigation hasn't stopped. If anything, the last 2 years have brought more activity than the case has seen in a long time. A third excavation at the old Castalloy factory site. A newly named suspect. A bone sent for forensic testing, its results still pending. Renewed calls from journalists and advocates for South Australia to finally hold a coronial inquest. Something that, remarkably, has never happened in nearly 60 years. Every lead still draws headlines. Every anniversary still draws national attention. And every failed excavation still draws the same aching disappointment. Because somewhere in this story, there's a family that never got to bury their children, or know their fate, or close the door on the worst day of their lives. The Beaumont case isn't cold because nobody's looking. It's cold because, so far, the truth has refused to be found. So here's where it stands. 3 children, 1 beach, a mystery man who was never identified, and 60 years later, more questions than answers. A new suspect. An untested bone. A truth that might be one DNA result away from finally surfacing, or might stay buried forever, the way it has since before most of us were born. Who do you think the man on the beach really was? Drop your theory in the comments. This case has more armchair detectives than almost any other in Australian history, and I want to hear yours. If you want the next unsolved mystery the moment it drops, subscribe, because somewhere out there, another case is waiting to be reopened.